Hi class, it's Mrs. Fickus, and today we're going to start a summer school type of class where each day we're going to be kind of doing projects and subjects that are based on improving a skill set, and that skill set is going to be shading properly. So what we're going to do, and this is kind of best suited towards anyone who would like to learn how to shade better, more realistically. We're going to be using graphite, which is pencil, and charcoal in some of our studies. Also, this would be a good set of lessons for maybe you are a middle school student who's getting ready to start high school art classes next year, or maybe you're a high school student who will be taking some art classes for the first time in years to come. Or maybe you are a high school student who is preparing to go to college in the fall, and you're going to be a freshman who is interested in becoming a part of an art department in a college or a university, and you want to pump up your skills that you do have so that you're on a playing field that you can produce the best work possible whenever you get into your college drawing classes, because you will be in those classes with a wide variety of people who've had a wide variety of experiences in their own art classes in high school. So you might be with people who come from a large school where there were a lot of choices of art classes to take and a lot of individual instruction, or you might be with people who come from a smaller school where there weren't very many choices for them as far as art classes in their high school setting. So these are some basic skills that, I say basic, but they're a little bit more advanced than that. But if you practice these skills, you will create work that will help you to continually build on your artistic abilities. So we're going to be talking about some shading basics, and this is going to be Unit 1. Okay, so this is going to be the overview for the class called Shading Basics, and this is going to be Unit 1's overview. So the first activity is we're going to review perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about perspective and some basics. If you want to know more detailed things about perspective, you can look at some of my other videos, but we're just going to talk about it loosely, how it affects basic forms and shapes. Shapes are 2D, forms are 3D. Our first assignment is I'm going to ask you to find something at home that is a cube form. So a small box, it's okay if it's not very cube-like. If it's more rectangular, that's fine. Find whatever you can that has the form of a cube, and I want you to set it up in a spot where you can put a light on it or control the light a little bit. Draw it from 5 different views. So turn it, and we'll talk about that in my demonstration. I'm going to show you how to create a value scale properly with 5 to 9 values. We're also going to look at how to set up a 3-object still life and draw 10 thumbnails, with each one being a different arrangement. Then I want you, for your last project, I want you to pick one of these 10 thumbnails that is the best of the best setup that you like. And we'll talk about good setups and bad setups. And I want you to complete a detailed drawing of one of your 10 thumbnails, hopefully with the setup in front of you. If you do not have the setup in front of you the whole time, then take a picture of it and you can work from a picture, because if you're in a space where you can't really set it up and keep it there, working from your own photograph is fine. And you're going to finish it with 5 to 9 values. Okay, so that is what we're going to be working on. Okay, class, so here I've chosen 3 objects. I made sure that my 3 objects were very different from each other. Now, of course, these are, my things. You don't have to have anything like this in your 3-object setup. Just pick 3 objects that are very different in size and very different in shape. Doesn't matter what color they are at this stage in the game. So what I did is I just took a folding table, I put a black cloth on it, and I set my stuff up. So here's my 3 objects. And what I'm going to do, I've got my camera set up right here. If you were using your phone, You could use your phone or your iPad or whatever you have available that can take a picture. And you're going to set up your 3 objects, take a picture, rearrange them, take another picture. You could swap out objects, take the cube out and put something else there. Okay, so, but the main thing is you want to make sure that they're all different sizes and different shapes. Now, one of the things I want you to watch out for, I have mine set up on a little box, so I wanted to kind of limit how far apart I could put these. You want to be really careful about what are called tangents. And let me show you what a tangent is. If we're looking from this angle right here, I barely have my apple. I mean, it's just kissing the cube. And the cube is almost just kissing the milk jug, the porcelain jug. It would be better if I did this than having them just kissing each other. That's called a tangent. You either want them to be overlapping each other or not touching at all. Too many of these little places where they're just barely kissing each other, where they're creating tangents, should be avoided. You want to avoid tangents at all costs. It creates a still life that everything looks like it's been placed in a way that is uncomfortable to the viewer. It would be better if you actually even scooted this one way back and put the apple right there. Okay, so now we have objects that are overlapping each other. Or if I put the apple way over here. You also want to avoid where the bottoms or the tops are all lined up in a line, which I almost have that right here. You want to avoid things like that. I could put that would be a decent setup. So those are the things you want to avoid. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a bunch of pictures. I'm going to change my setup 10 times, and then we'll talk about thumbnails. Okay, we are going to start out our unit with a little bit of review. And we're going to talk about our basic shapes and our basic forms. And whenever we're talking about basic forms, your basic shapes are your circle, square, rectangle, triangle, and ellipse or oval, however you want to say it. Your basic forms are the 3D versions of these. So a form with a circle would be your sphere. Okay, so sphere, your cube, for a rectangle, it would be a taller cube, or a prism, which would be triangular. Then you have your pyramid, or sometimes this the triangle, the form version of it will be a cone, which we've talked about this in my drawing tutorials. So if you haven't seen those yet, I would go back and look at them again, because we talk about all of these in more detail. And for the ellipse, it would be an ovoid, which would have the same principles that you have here with your sphere. So it would be like an example of that would be an egg. An egg shape, and then it would be shaded according to whichever direction the light was hitting it. Same thing with its shadow. Okay, so those are a little bit of review of your basic shapes and forms. And then when we're talking about perspective as it relates to still life, we're talking about which direction the angles on your objects are going. So if you were having a can or a container that has a cylindrical shape, then which direction is that going? And then which direction would your cubes or boxes be going? It's another thing we didn't talk about over here. Would be a cylinder. That's one of your basic forms. Here's your shadow. We'll blend that up. And we'll talk more about each of these as we encounter them. What you want to do is, if you want to really get an idea of how cubes and rectangular forms look at cereal boxes, look at Pop-Tart boxes, take those and actually really focus on them. Take pictures of them and look at the different angles. You can take your pencil, and if you have a picture of your cube, you can actually kind of lay your pencil on the picture and take a look at the directions of the angles. For cylinders, get a can out of the pantry or a soda can or something like that. For spheres, get a ball, basketball or something like that to look at and take some pictures of it. For ovoids, eggs. For a cone, those are a lot harder to encounter. You don't encounter those very much in like everyday objects. So that would be kind of tricky. So next we're going to talk about, in perspective, what would that look like for a cube, which we've already done this in another video, so this is going to be a very brief review. So if you're looking at your cube from the corner, like this, typically you would have vanishing points here and vanishing points here to be going off in that direction. You'd make sure that your vertical lines are straight vertical. And here would be your cube. I would suggest that you go back and take a look at my video on my drawing exercises and look for the one with the cubes. If you are above or below your cube, if your line of sight is above or below your cube, that will change how the top of your cube looks. Also, this corner right here can change drastically to where you might really only see a very shortened side on one side and a much more elongated side on another. So how this side looks will change according to how much the corner is facing you and how much of the top you see. So having a cube object is very handy for helping you understand this, because this is something that's very, very important. And how this relates in still life we'll look at when we look at your still life that you've set up. I want you to draw your cube or whatever object you're using as your cube from 5 different views. And what I mean by that is set it on a surface, and I want you to use your phone or whatever camera you happen to have. Take pictures where you're a little bit lower so you don't see the top as much. So it would look kind of like this. Then maybe stand up a bit more so that you can see more of the top. Go over to where you can see more of one side. Twist it, kind of turn it just a little bit. So try and get as many different views of your cube. Maybe a little bit more from above, a little bit more straight on, with straight on side like this. So set it up and try and take multiple pictures of your cube. Go through your pictures, edit them to make sure that you didn't get your cube crooked, straighten your images, and then draw your cube in 5 different views. So pick 5 different ones, and you can put them all on one paper, either kind of like this that I did randomly, or you can create thumbnails. And for that, all you have to do is just sketch a little box and say, okay, this is the view of my cube right here. that's my cube, and go through, solidify those lines with a ruler, straighten everything up. Next, we're going to talk about value scales. Value scales are very, very important because really you only need 5 to 9 values, which is changes from light to dark within a pencil, charcoal, or even a color for it to be able to trick the viewer into thinking that something is three-dimensional. So if I were going to use a pencil, typically, the easiest way to do this is just take your ruler, draw on the top of it and the bottom. You don't have to measure. Basically, you're just tracing your ruler. If you do not have a ruler that you can use, you can take a piece of regular copy paper and fold it 3 or 4 times to get yourself a nice rectangular shape, and you can draw your straight lines with that. Now for this first one, I'm going to divide this up into 5 pieces. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this one I'm just going to write 5 values. It's a good way to use up that box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try very, very hard to make this one my darkest. So that would be my 5. Okay. The number 3 would be my middle value. And this will be basically white. Okay, so sometimes the easiest way to do this is to start with your middle value. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get my middle value right first. If you're using a pencil, try and shade as smoothly as you can. Notice my fingertips are far away from, I'm not shading like this. I'm scooting my fingers way back so I can lay it down. Your goal is to eventually know how to shade without streaks or stripes in your work. Because if you do decide to blend, it is so much easier to blend without drag marks from your pencil or your charcoal. And I'm just going to try and create my nice middle gray value here. I don't want it to be super dark, and I don't want it to be too light. My experience over the years has been I very rarely have a student who draws too darkly. 90% of the time, they are too timid, and all of their drawings are overall a very pale gray color. Now I need to look at this and I need to say, okay, if this is my blackest one, which I think this feels a little too dark, probably going to have to lighten it. I am going to really try and make this my darkest black that I can get with my material. This would be the same if I was using a colored pencil, a graphite pencil, charcoal, whatever I was using, even a colored pencil. If I was using a colored pencil and this square was blue, I would want to make sure that it had as many layers of blue as I could possibly get on there, so it was as dark as I could possibly get it. It would be the bluest blue that I could make with the pencil that I had. Okay. So now I'm going to do my blending. It's going to shake my camera a bit because I still haven't gotten that bit taken care of. But that's also how you can tell that I'm working, that I'm actually doing this. Okay, so I am really making sure that that is really, really dark. Now I'm going to look at these two and I'm going to think, well, can I get something that's in between them? That would be my 4. My 4 is going to be a dark gray. I think that probably this one's a little bit too dark. So all I'm going to do is lighten it a bit. You could take a little piece of tissue or paper towel and lighten it. Now I feel like I can probably get a dark gray in here that is a gray that is in between blackest and middle gray. And that's what this 4 is going to be. Typically, whenever I see a student draw, and this goes for high school students and middle school students mostly, they spend their entire drawing in the 1, 2, and 3 range. They really don't do any 4s at all. Okay, now I'm going to lighten that a little bit and blend it. I had one professor who we would have to do these little little swatches, like we would have to paint a value scale in white and black using all the grays, and then we would have to cut out these little tiny squares, and we would have to arrange them in a value scale that she could not see where the line was. Like there's a line right here between 3 and 4. She would have you do it over if there was a visible change. It had to be a completely fluid change all the way across. But those were 12-stepped value scales. Now this one is going to be a super light value. Now a 5 value scale is a little bit restrictive, especially in your lighter tones, because there's really not much between white and light. But this is kind of your goal when you're shading things in your beginning stages. You want to have some areas that are white. Those are going to be anywhere that light is hitting your object. Most of your drawing is going to be right here with some areas of this, some areas of this. You're going to have the majority of your values are going to be in the 2, 3, and 4 range. And then 5 is for your darkest shadows. This is areas where there's hardly any light at all getting into those areas. So let's see what that looks like with a 12-step scale. So I'm going to pause it for a second while I draw my scale. I think I said 12 values just a second ago. Remember, we're only keeping it to 9. So this one's going to be your 9 values. So right here, this would be 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Since 1 is white, the middle of a 9 value scale is your 5. Okay, that is going to be our 3. So if I'm talking about something whenever I'm shading it from now on, I'm going to either say, oh, that's a 3 on a 5 value scale, or that's a 5 on a 9 value scale. This is what I mean. If I say it's a 3, I mean it's a middle gray. So try and keep that in mind. So just like before, I'm going to start with my middle, and I'm going to try and find my middle gray. I'm going to kind of look at my 3 here to try and decide what my middle is. They're the same scale. This one just has more opportunities for different values in it. And the value is your gradation from light to dark for a color. Or actually, you should say hue. So here is my middle gray, and I feel it's pretty close to that gray there. If I didn't think so, I could lighten it a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this my 9, Black as I can make it. Just like we did before. Okay, then this is going to be my white, so I'm going to leave it alone. So I'm just going to take my blender. I'm going to make a light gray. And I know that that's going to be pretty dark because we don't have very much going on this scale on this end. So I want to make sure I make it super light. Your goal, I'm rushing this, your goal is going to be smoothness throughout this scale. Now what you're going to do is you're going to fill in with, here's your light gray, slightly darker, medium, darker, darker, darker. So let's take a look at how that would look when it's done. Okay, so here now we have our value scale. This end could probably have been a little bit lighter, but just for the sake of trying to be quick about it, I just want you to understand whenever I'm talking about value, this is what I mean. And the same thing would apply if this was a strip of blue or a strip of red. And what your goal is trying to understand those gradual changes so that whenever I say in the lighter values, which will be, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 being your mid-tone, and in your darker values. Right here is about where the majority of your drawings are going to be, with pieces of highlight and pieces of shadow. So we'll talk about that more when we talk about thumbnails. Okay, so a little while ago at the beginning of this tutorial, I showed you a still life setup and I told you I was going to take some pictures. Here's the pictures I took. These are on my screen of my computer. And what I did is I took them and I cropped them a little bit and I put them onto a PowerPoint slide so I could see all of them at once. Now, I didn't take a tremendous amount of time cropping them, and we're going to talk about some problems that you might have whenever you are cropping, if you are working from a photograph. If you can work from life and keep these still life setups done and take your picture, do your drawing, then move your still life around, take your picture, do your thumbnail, move your still life, that is awesome. But I personally know that not everybody has the space or the time available to them to leave something set up where someone else isn't going to come through and bump into it, change it, pick it up, and take it away. If you're an adult with children in the house, that'll be your problem. If you're a kid with younger siblings, that'll be your problem. Or maybe you just have limited space, and wherever you set this stuff up, you just can't keep it there for very long. So if you have to take a picture, change it, take a picture, change it, and work solely from images, I understand. But just be aware that at some point in time, you're going to end up in a live drawing class, and we'll talk about what it is like to draw something from life at a future date. Right now, we're just trying to get you used to the vocabulary and the setup. So here's my 10 different setups. And as you can tell, some of them are the same setup with the light changed slightly. So on these, I didn't really have a spotlight. This was just room light. Then I grabbed a spotlight and set it up. You could use a lamp. Heck, a flashlight would work. But you can see here, the light was kind of hitting it more in front. And over here, I moved the light off to the side. And you can get a lot of different reactions in your photographs from having your light either moved further away or moved to where it's hitting things more at an angle. So don't be afraid to play with your light and control your light. It's best that you have control over your light situation. Here's one where I had it way too close. So you can definitely see this one right here. And okay, this one, and this one are all the same setup. This is with a light source that's pretty much straight on, you know, just like room light. This is a spotlight moved over here. This is a spotlight moved over here and way too close. So that's why I kept those three that are the same setups. You can see right here how the light change affected it. Here I had the light pretty much over here on the side. Right here I moved the light, my spotlight, down to where it was kind of slightly below where everything was at. So it cast a whole lot different shadows than this one here. I've got a much stronger shadow here and shadows in here, which I really like that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to draw each of these. Whenever you are drawing a still life or anything, avoid the dead center of your thumbnail. Scoot it right, scoot it left. You don't want anything. I would not put this right here as the middle of my drawing. I would scoot everything over. This right here, I would not center. You want to avoid the middle of your thumbnail or the middle of your drawing paper when you're drawing anything. So I'm going to draw my thumbnails now. Okay, class, here's an example of my first thumbnail. Whenever you're doing a thumbnail sketch, keep it simple. You just want to get your size relationships between your objects accurate. You want to figure out how you want to crop it, how much you want to scoot your objects right or left or up or down. So make sure that you don't have anything that is too close to the edge, like kissing the edge. You can have things going off the edge, but that's usually for very zoomed in still lifes. And if something goes off the edge on one side, there's kind of a necessary thing that something has to go off on the opposite edge. So just don't worry about that yet. Do each of your thumbnails for each of the pictures that you took. Focus on only 3 values: super dark, white, and medium, like this. I've got my super dark, my white, and then my kind of medium right here. Make sure you can kind of see each object. And what this does is it's just a practice. It's a practice to get you used to seeing something and then drawing it, and seeing something and then drawing it. My still life drawing class, we had to do 20 of these before every project. And so we did 20 thumbnails. And usually it would take me about 40 setups to get 20 good thumbnails. So a lot of times I was actually doing 40 thumbnails. Then we would turn in those 20 thumbnails, and our professor would look at them and say, okay, this one, and this one, what do you think? Those are better. And they would explain why those were better setups. And then, so we would narrow it down to 5. And then I would do 5 more detailed thumbnail drawings. And then I would narrow those 5 down of those detailed thumbnail drawings. I would choose one that was the best. And then that one setup was the one that I would reset and set up again and have set up and do my drawing or painting based on that one setup. So by the time I got to my final drawings or my final painting, I had already drawn and painted all my setups 40 times or more. And so by the time I narrowed it down to the one drawing I was going to do, I had picked the setup that was possibly the best setup I was capable of doing at the time. And then I had already drawn it as a part of my 20 or 40 thumbnails. And then I'd drawn it as part of my narrowed down 5 thumbnails. And then I'd drawn it one more time in a more complete small drawing that was usually about the size of a 9x12 sheet of paper, where I would get it all drawn out. Then I would either put it on my canvas and paint it, or I would put it on my really big drawing pad and draw it on on a 18x24 sheet of paper, of charcoal paper. So, you know, it takes a long process and it's a lot of work, but in the end, when you can draw something and be really proud of it, it is so worth it. And you'll just have to get used to the whole drawing is putting in the time. So not to make it drudgery or anything like that for you guys, but believe me, it is 100% worth it whenever you can kick everybody else's butt. Good luck.